Black CEO, humiliated by billionaire's wife at White House Gala. By sunrise, $900M, vanished. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. People like you don't belong in places like this. The words hit the marble hall like a blade dropped from the ceiling, fast, sharp, and unmistakably meant to wound. They cracked through the soft hum of conversation, slicing across glittering gowns, tailored tuxedos, and the echoing grandeur of a national gala held beneath a domed skylight of cold, perfect glass. At the center of the chaos stood a tall black woman in a fitted obsidian gown, shoulders squared, chin slightly raised, eyes like tempered steel. Her presence didn't ask for attention. It commanded it. Silent, unshaken, unmoved. The way a mountain remains unchanged, even when storms scream around its peak. Opposite her, inches away, stood a woman whose fury had burned past the point of dignity. A white-haired matriarch, draped in midnight velvet, pearls shining like polished frost at her throat. Her finger jabbed dangerously close to the black woman's face, trembling with the weight of her rage and entitlement. "Get out of here!" she shrieked, her voice echoing against marble columns and the carved stone statues that lined the hall like silent judges. Gasps rippled through the crowd. At least a dozen phones lifted instantly, sleek, glowing rectangles rising like dark predators scenting blood. The attendees, wrapped in luxury and pretense, shifted from polite curiosity to gleeful anticipation. Not a single person stepped in. No one interrupted. They wanted a spectacle, and the matriarch was giving them one. One woman in a navy gown covered her mouth dramatically, but her eyes gleamed with excitement. A man in a white tux whispered, "This is insane," even as he hit record with practiced speed. Another guest, clutching a gold clutch, whispered, "Does she even know who she just yelled at?" Her friend shrugged. "Does it matter? Look at her, she doesn't fit this room." That was the point. That was always the point. But the black woman didn't flinch. Not when the matriarch's voice rose. Not when the room turned into an audience thirsty for humiliation. Not even when the insult burned hotter than the lights overhead. She simply crossed her arms slowly, deliberately, each movement carrying the heavy, unspoken message that she was not prey in this story, no matter how many phones tried to frame her as one. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to her. The matriarch stepped closer, her breath sharp with fury. "Women like you should know your place," she hissed. "You're lucky we even let you through the door. This is the White House, not some charity shelter." A murmur spread low, electric, cruel. Behind the black woman, a pair of security guards shifted uncertainly. They weren't sure if they were supposed to intervene or simply watch. Everyone seemed frozen by the raw imbalance of power being flaunted in public view. The black woman didn't back away. She didn't argue. She simply looked down at the matriarch's finger hovering just shy of her cheek, then slowly lifted her gaze back to meet the older woman's eyes. That stare was a storm contained in a single breath, cold, controlled, calculated. A warning whispered in silence. The atmosphere changed. The lighting seemed to dim. The music faltered mid-note. The murmurs softened into a tense, waiting quiet. Something unseen had shifted. Something the matriarch was too blinded by arrogance to feel. But the room felt it. Every guest, every spectator with a phone in hand, every person who thought they understood power until they looked into the wrong pair of eyes. For a moment, just a breath, the hall trembled with an anticipation no one could name. The matriarch, oblivious, sneered. "You heard me. Leave. Now. Before you embarrass yourself any more than you already have." But the only embarrassment about to unfold was hers. Because the black woman finally moved. Not much. Just enough to uncross her arms, tilt her head slightly, and let a small, unreadable smile rise at the corner of her mouth. It wasn't anger. It wasn't fear. It wasn't even defiance. It was certainty. The kind of certainty only someone holding unimaginable power could wear so effortlessly. The kind of certainty that said, the room just made the costliest mistake of its existence. The crowd didn't understand. Not yet, but they would. And by dawn, the entire nation would know the price of humiliating the wrong woman. For a long, suspended second, no one moved. Not the matriarch with her trembling finger still poised like a weapon. Not the cluster of tuxedo donors behind her, frozen mid-whisper. Not the guests at the edge of the hall, clutching champagne flutes they suddenly forgot how to sip. Something shifted so subtle it barely registered at first. But it was real, palpable. A tightening in the air, like invisible strings pulling the room into silence. A single note from the live orchestra fluttered, cracked, then dissolved into an awkward, brittle quiet. Even the chandeliers, tall and dripping in gold, seemed to dim like they, too, were bracing for whatever was coming. The matriarch scoffed, mistaking the silence for victory. "Oh, now you're quiet?" she taunted, the edge of triumph sharpening her voice. "Typical. You walk into a room you don't belong in, and suddenly you expect respect?" She took a step closer, close enough that her pearls brushed the black woman's shoulder. The older woman's perfume, a dense, expensive floral, hung between them like a declaration of dominance. The black woman didn't move, not a flinch, not a breath out of place. Her posture remained straight, elegant, almost impossibly composed. That's when the whispers began. Soft at first, fragile as cracks forming beneath ice. Is she staff? No, she came from the front entrance. She's not reacting. That's strange. Wait, look at her eyes. Because her eyes had changed. Just slightly. Steady before, now sharpened into something colder, heavier. A force wrapped in velvet. A calculation happening in real time. It wasn't anger. It wasn't fear. It was the dawning realization that she had just given the room enough rope and someone had eagerly slipped their head through it. From the far end of the gallery, a man in a cobalt tuxedo lowered his phone, frowning as if sensing something everyone else had missed. His wife tugged his sleeve, urging him to keep recording. He didn't. He couldn't look away from her, this poised, silent woman who somehow made the hall feel smaller, tighter, as though gravity itself was bending around her. Meanwhile, the matriarch continued openly, her voice dropping to a vicious whisper meant for the black woman yet somehow audible to all. "You think that dress makes you equal?" she hissed. "It doesn't. Women like you are always pretending to be sophisticated, pretending to be accomplished, pretending to be." She leaned in even closer. "One of us." Gasps rippled like a wave. Someone muttered, "That's too far," but no one stepped in. The black woman finally lowered her arms. The movement was slow, precise, deliberate, low-temperature power wrapped inside a single, graceful gesture. She wasn't defending herself. She was preparing the room for the truth they hadn't earned yet. From the corner of the hall, her assistant, hidden among guests, dressed like any other attendee, tightened her grip on a discreet earpiece. Her expression had changed, too. She knew this look. She'd seen it before in boardrooms, negotiations, closed-door meetings where billions hung in the air like piano wire. It was the look her boss wore when she decided someone had crossed a line there was no coming back from. Phones continued recording. Eyes stayed wide. Everyone sensed it now. The shift, the rearranging of power, the unseen current turning beneath the marble floor. The matriarch, oblivious, straightened her spine and declared loud enough for the hall to hear, "You will leave this place in shame. I'll make sure of it." And that was when something remarkable happened. The black woman, still silent, let a faint, unreadable smile form. Not amusement, not kindness, something cooler. A warning, a promise. A quiet prophecy the room was seconds away from understanding. The atmosphere didn't just drop. It sank, heavy, inevitable, irreversible. because the woman they tried to humiliate was about to show them exactly who she was. The matriarch's words still hovered in the air, sharp as glass, when a small but deliberate motion stirred the stillness at the edge of the hall. A woman in a charcoal evening gown, elegant, understated, invisible by design, pressed 2 fingers to the side of her ear. It was a gesture subtle enough to be missed by almost everyone, except the one person it was meant for. Her eyes flicked toward the black woman at the center of the storm. A soft nod, a signal, acknowledgement, permission. The black woman didn't nod back. She didn't need to. Their understanding had been refined through years of crises, negotiations, and moments far more consequential than a public humiliation. But she saw it. She felt it. The assistant's readiness moved through her like the click of a lock opening. Hidden beneath the folds of the black woman's gown, just under the slip of fabric at her wrist, a wafer-thin earpiece hummed to life. A voice, steady, crisp, familiar, spoke in her ear. "Systems green. Your call." She didn't respond. Not yet. Her hands remained still, her face unreadable. Not a strand of hair disturbed by the tension around her. She simply breathed in the cold air of the hall, letting it settle in her chest like the calm before an approaching storm. A man nearby whispered, "Shay's too calm. That's not normal," his partner answered, barely breathing. "Maybe she's scared." But the man shook his head. "No. That's not fear." They didn't know what they were witnessing. Not yet. Across the room, the matriarch mistook silence for submission, a mistake the powerful make right before losing everything. "You think ignoring me will save you?" she sneered. "Do you know who my husband is? Do you have the faintest idea what kind of world you just stepped into?" The black woman finally blinked slowly, her eyelids lifting again like velvet curtains, revealing a deeper, colder resolve. She reached into her clutch, not frantically, not defensively, but with the same poised precision she used in boardrooms where a single sentence could cost or save billions. A ripple passed through the guests. Phones tilted in closer, shoulders lifted, breaths caught. The matriarch stepped back half a step, instinct finally whispering a warning she didn't yet understand. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded, but her voice betrayed the first tremor of uncertainty. The black woman's fingers closed around her phone. A flawless device, sleek, matte, custom-built, no logos, no case. A machine crafted for someone who lived in secure channels and silent decisions. She raised it to eye level. Her assistant's voice returned, softer this time. "We're online. Say the word." A single thumbprint unlocked the screen, casting a faint glow across her composed features. The room watched as a row of icons vanished, replaced by a single command window. No one there recognized it. No one except her team. Behind the guests, a security guard frowned, noticing something shift in her expression, something that made the hair on the back of his neck rise. The matriarch scoffed, regaining false confidence. "Put that away. You're embarrassing yourself." But the black woman wasn't filming. She wasn't calling for help. She wasn't documenting anything. She was preparing to move numbers, numbers large enough to move futures. Her thumb hovered over a single encrypted prompt. Just one tap, one command, one decision. The assistant held her breath. A few guests, unknowingly, did the same. The black woman spoke at last 4 quiet words, not to the matriarch, not to the crowd, but to the voice in her ear. "Stand by for confirmation." And just like that, the room's axis shifted again. They didn't know it yet, but the most expensive mistake of the night had already been made. The humiliation was merely the spark. The real damage, the kind measured in billions, careers, and legacies, had just begun to stir beneath her fingertips. The seed of the reveal had been planted, and the room was moments away from watching it bloom. If anyone in that hall had known even a fragment of her story, they might have stepped back. They might have lowered their phones. They might have understood that her silence was not weakness, but the patience of someone who had learned to measure destruction with precision. But they didn't know. Not who she was. Not what she controlled. Not what Shed survived. The black woman, still holding her unlocked phone loosely at her side, let her gaze drift past the matriarch, past the guests, past the glittering chandeliers. Her expression didn't change, but inside, memory tightened like a fist. She had been here before. Not in this hall, not in this dress, not under this roof of polished authority, but in rooms where she was weighed by skin first, competence second, and humanity not at all. At 17, Shed stood in a bank lobby holding a folder of scholarship paperwork, only for a manager to wave her off with a bored flick of the hand. "These rooms aren't for you," Head muttered without looking up. At 23, Shed pitched her first startup to a panel of investors who praised her ideas, but quietly told a colleague afterward that she wasn't the right face for a front-facing brand. At 28, Shed signed her first major acquisition with a pen she bought from a drugstore because the board refused to provide one, claiming she would probably steal it. She had learned something vital in all those rooms. Noise is temporary, power is permanent, and those who weaponize humiliation never expect it to recoil. Her empire, built across 2 decades, was proof of that. A global architecture of influence. A portfolio of companies woven through the financial arteries of 3 continents. A net worth whispered, never declared. A signature that moved markets. A private network of specialists who responded to a single command faster than governments. And yet she remained nearly invisible by choice. No interviews, no red carpet appearances, no public bragging. The kind of woman people underestimated because she knew how to stay silent until she didn't. On the opposite side of the hall, her assistant watched her closely. She knew the story better than anyone. She had been there when the woman in black turned a failing aerospace company into a dominant market force in under 3 years. She'd been there when they acquired a bankrupt energy conglomerate and rebuilt it from the bones out. She'd heard her say more than once, "Power doesn't announce itself, it appears." And tonight it was beginning to appear. The assistant's earpiece buzzed gently. Liquidity vault secured. Emergency channels open. Awaiting directive. She exhaled, steady and focused. The ground was shifting, and she could feel it. Meanwhile, the matriarch remained oblivious, mistaking stillness for defeat. She straightened her pearl necklace, the movement sharp with arrogance. "You're lucky I'm speaking to you at all," she hissed. "Women like you usually talk to my staff, not to me." The black woman looked at her then, finally, directly. There was no anger, no pain, just recognition. Not of the matriarch, of the moment. A moment she had been trained for her entire life to decide, without raising her voice, who would rise and who would fall. A man nearby swallowed hard, sensing something change in her posture, though he couldn't name it. A woman in silver whispered, "That's not the look of someone backing down." They were right. Because the humiliation wasn't the beginning of her breaking, it was the beginning of her decision-making. Her phone hummed again, all systems ready. Her fingers tightened slightly against the device. Somewhere deep inside the hall, beneath the polished floors, past the gold railings, behind velvet ropes, an invisible countdown began. And the people who had laughed moments earlier had no idea that the woman standing before them had been forged in fire they would never survive. They had not humiliated her. They had awakened her, and awakening her was the one thing they should never have done. While the black woman stood poised in controlled silence, the matriarch's family clustered near the head of the hall, unaware that the center of gravity in the room was about to snap away from them. The patriarch arrived first, stepping out from behind a marble column as if summoned by the disturbance. Harrison Lockridge, wealth in his posture, desperation in his eyes. He wore a tuxedo tailored to hide the truth. His empire had been rotting beneath him for years. He approached with the stiff confidence of a man accustomed to solving every problem with a signature or a threat. "What's happening?" he murmured to his wife, low enough to sound discreet, but loud enough to assert authority. His wife, still flushed from shouting, jerked her chin toward the black woman. "This intruder." Handling it." Harrison's gaze flicked toward the center of the hall. The woman in black stood perfectly composed, phone at her side, her presence unsettling in a way he couldn't articulate. His brow tightened. "Where's security?" he hissed. "They're watching," she snapped. as they should. A dangerous assumption. Behind him, their son lingered Carter Lockridge, 32, jaw sharp, suit expensive, expression hollow. He drank from a crystal glass as if sipping the last drops of his birthright. His eyes carried the dull sheen of a man who had never been told no and had no idea what the word meant until tonight. Beside him stood their daughter, Liana, elegant, poised, a shimmering silver gown wrapped around ambition like a second skin. She looked the black woman up and down with the delicate contempt of someone trained to judge others from birth. "Who is she?" Liana asked, narrowing her eyes. "She doesn't seem intimidated," her mother scoffed. "Oh, she's intimidated. She's just pretending not to be." But Liana wasn't convinced. Her gaze sharpened an instinct, whispering that something about this woman did not fit the usual script of humiliation and dismissal. At the far end of the room, a financial advisor hurried toward Harrison, smartphone in hand. He leaned in, voice strained. "Sir, the documents for the 6 to billion package aren't loading. The system is stalled." "Stalled?" Harrison muttered. "How? Everything was finalized an hour ago." "I don't know. We're trying to refresh, but—" The advisor swallowed, glancing toward the woman in the black gown. "It's like someone triggered a lockdown." Harrison froze. A chill crawled down his spine, subtle but unmistakable. He had built an empire on intuition, on reading rooms, on sensing threats before they could speak. And something in this room was speaking now, clear as thunder. "This was not an accident. We cannot afford delays," he whispered sharply. "We need that capital injection tonight." He said it like a man whispering a confession. Because it wasn't just a business deal. It was oxygen. A final gasp for a dynasty suffocating behind velvet curtains and curated illusions. Their steel conglomerate, once formidable, had been quietly collapsing under debt, lawsuits, and the consequences of Carter's reckless ventures. Their real estate division was over-leveraged. Their private portfolio was bleeding liquidity. And tonight's supposed prestigious gala was nothing more than a performance, a lavish stage, to distract from the financial implosion behind the scenes. But the deal they needed, the $6 billion life raft they had begged an unnamed investor to finalize, was hanging on a digital thread they no longer controlled. Liana leaned in, voice low. "What if she's somebody?" Her mother scoffed again. "She's nobody." A sentence spoken by every collapsing dynasty at the very moment it begins to fall. Across the hall, the black woman lifted her chin just slightly, as if acknowledging a distant cue. Her assistant's voice murmured through the hidden earpiece. "Mom, their liquidity reports just hit our dashboard. They're worse than projected." A beat of silence. Then the assistant added, "If you cancel, they won't recover." The black woman didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her stillness was the response. Because while the Lockridge family fought to maintain the illusion of control, the truth was already slipping through their fingers. And the woman they had chosen to humiliate the one they dismissed without a second thought was the only person in the room who could save them or destroy them. And the decision was seconds away. The hall had grown so quiet that the faint hum of the overhead lights seemed louder than the orchestra's last fading note. It wasn't silence born from respect. It was the kind that creeps in when a room senses it has wandered into danger without realizing when or how. The black woman still centered beneath the vaulted arch, still holding her phone with unsettling calm, lifted her eyes. She didn't look at the matriarch. She didn't need to. Instead, her gaze drifted slowly, almost lazily, toward the Lockridge family gathered near the head of the hall. One by one, her eyes passed over them. Harrison's tightly clenched jaw, Liana's brittle poise cracking at the edges, Carter's drink trembling slightly in his grip, the matriarch's forced confidence evaporating as the air thickened. They felt it, every one of them, a shift they couldn't name but instinctively feared. From the corner of the room, her assistant's voice crackled softly through the earpiece, steady but urgent. "Mom, final verification complete. All cross-holdings confirmed. They're exposed." A pause. "Just say the word." The black woman inhaled once, slow, measured. Her fingers tightened delicately around the phone, like a violinist preparing for the first decisive note. A few guests leaned forward without meaning to. Someone's bracelet clinked softly, the sound startling in the hush. For the first time since the confrontation began, Harrison Lockridge stepped toward her. Not aggressively, not confidently, but with the hesitant caution of a man approaching a machine he doesn't understand, one that might explode if touched incorrectly. "Listen," he began, voice low but strained. "I don't know what my wife said to you, but this is all a misunderstanding." She didn't look at him. Not yet. The matriarch spun around, scandalized. "You're speaking to her?" "Harrison! She?" He silenced her with a raised hand, an act that would have shocked the entire gala if anyone had breath left to react. His eyes locked onto the black woman's phone. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice thinner than a moment earlier. Still, she didn't answer. The assistant's voice returned, gentle but unyielding. "Whenever you're ready, ma'am." In the shadows of the gallery entrance, two security guards exchanged confused glances. They weren't sure who needed protection anymore. Then, finally, the black woman lifted her head fully, her gaze slicing straight through Harrison. Her voice, when it came, was soft, calm, absolute, confirm, full withdrawal. 4 words, 4 small, unhurried words. The assistant froze, absorbing the command, then answered, confirmed, initiating. The effect was instantaneous. In Harrison's pocket, his phone buzzed violently once, twice, 3 times as alerts detonated across his encrypted finance apps. His advisor stumbled backward, staring at the screen in horror. "Sir, your accounts, the deal, it's gone." The matriarch blinked, confused. "What do you mean, gone? How can it be gone?" "Deals don't just disappear, but they did." When she erased them, across the hall the digital display for the Gala's program glitched, flickered, then abruptly shifted into a stark black screen with white text. "Transaction error. Lockridge capital infusion canceled." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Carter dropped his glass. The shatter echoed like a gunshot. Liana's face drained of color, her hand gripping the railing for balance. The matriarch spun toward her husband, frantic. "Harrison, fix this, now." But Harrison couldn't move. He stared at the woman in black like a man, realizing the storm he provoked wasn't a metaphor, it was her. "Who are you?" he whispered. She finally lifted her gaze, calm and lethal. "Someone you should have treated with dignity?" Her phone vibrated once, a final notification confirming the irreversible transfer locks. The trigger had been pulled. The fall had begun. And the family who believed they ruled the room finally understood. They had just insulted the woman who owned the floor beneath their feet. Panic doesn't scream at first. It creeps quiet, invisible, curling around ankles, sliding up spines, chilling the bloodstream before the mind dares to understand what's happening. That was the silence gripping the Lockridge family now. Harrison's phone buzzed again, 3 rapid vibrations that felt less like alerts and more like blows. He fumbled it open with trembling fingers, eyes skimming the cascading notifications flashing across his screen. Account freeze in progress. Integrated credit lines. Revoked. Collateralized. Assets flagged for audit merger. Contract terminated. He blinked, breath catching. This isn't possible," he whispered, voice cracking. "This can't all happen at once." But it was happening, because she made it happen. Across the room, the black woman lowered her phone, its screen dark now, the command already sent, the machinery already unleashed. She didn't move. She didn't smile. Her stillness was the storm. Her assistant emerged from the shadows of the crowd, tablet in hand, face composed but eyes sharp. She reached her employer's side, leaning in just enough for only her to hear. Legal division online. Financial compliance online. All global nodes responding. A beat. The shutdown sequence completed in under 20 seconds. The woman in black didn't blink. Of course it had. The matriarch's voice, however, rose in a thin, unraveling scream. "What do you mean terminated? Harrison, say something. Fix it." Harrison tried, but whatever words he reached for collapsed inside his throat. Behind him, the family's financial advisor approached with a face drained of life. "Sir," the press wire picked it up. "They're already running the cancellation story." Liana's hand flew to her mouth. "No, No, no, this can't be happening. Carter stumbled backward, knocking into a statue, nearly tripping over the shattered glass at his feet. Dad, he croaked, this will destroy us. And it would, because the merger wasn't just a deal. It was a lifeline, the only thing keeping the Lockridge empire above water. The assistant tapped her tablet again, eyes scanning lines of cascading information. Additional alert, she murmured to the black woman. Secondary lenders are following suit. They're pulling their contingencies in real time. Another pause. They must have sensed the collapse. A whisper in the hall. They're finished. They're losing everything. Who is she? The black woman remained perfectly still, her expression unreadable. She wasn't reveling. She wasn't cruel. She was exact, every action measured, intentional, and executed with the efficiency of someone who had spent a lifetime mastering control. A man from the Gala staff hurried up to the Lockridge patriarch. Sir, the events donation processing system is down. He swallowed, completely down. The matriarch stared at him as if head spoken another language. What does that have to do with anything? She snapped. He hesitated. It's connected to the same pipeline, funding tonight's gala, your pipeline. The crowd murmured again, some with shock, some with dawning satisfaction. Harrison clenched the edge of the podium, knuckles bone white. Our entire network is collapsing, he muttered, dazed. Every division, every partner, pulling out. Liana's voice broke. This is sabotage. The black woman finally turned her head toward her assistant. Show them. The assistant tapped her tablet. Instantly, the massive LED screen above the hall flickered again, bright, sudden, merciless. A full layout blossomed across the display, a web of companies, banks, agencies, and funds tracing back to one silent, unnamed entity, her entity. The merger, their loans, their liquidity, their investors, their emergency capital, all of it connected through her, all of it authorized by her, all of it now severed because of her decision. Gasps broke like storm waves. The matriarch shook her head violently. No, this is a trick. This is lies. Women like her don't control. Her voice faltered. Because she saw it, the unmistakable signature at the bottom of the diagram. A name she had mocked, a woman she had humiliated. The black woman met her gaze at last. Slow, calm, devastating. Her voice emerged in a low, even tone. You called me nobody, but your empire breathes through the systems I built. Harrison stumbled back, throat constricting. You were the investor? I was the partner, she corrected softly. Until 10 minutes ago. The matriarch trembled, rage and terror warring in her expression. What gives you the right? The black woman stepped forward, not threatening, simply present, the way a truth stands in a room and needs no introduction. You gave me the right, she said, when you decided humiliation was easier than humanity, a sentence, a verdict, a closing bell on a dynasty that had never imagined it could fall. And as the catastrophic numbers continued rippling across the screen deals, dissolving, capital vanishing, alliances breaking, one truth settled over the gala like a final, irreversible shadow. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't touched a single person. She had simply moved her finger. And with it, she had moved the world beneath theirs. The collapse didn't roar. It spread fast, viral, merciless. Phones throughout the hall buzzed in domino waves as headlines detonated across news wires. Lockridge, empire facing immediate financial freefall. $6B deal canceled mid-gala source. Humiliation incident preceded withdrawal guests who moments ago recorded gleefully, now lowered their cameras, suddenly aware they had filmed the birth of a scandal and their own proximity to it. Donors stepped back. Politicians slipped into corners, whispering frantic calls. Sponsors quietly removed their pins, distancing themselves like rats abandoning a sinking ship. Carter buried his face in his hands. Liana stood frozen, mascara trembling. Harrison seemed to age a decade in seconds. And the matriarch, the woman who had screamed "Get out," stared around the hall as if seeing it for the first time, her empire evaporating faster than her dignity. Whispers swarmed her like hornets. She caused this. No, they caused this. Humiliated the wrong woman. The black woman didn't gloat. She simply watched the room rearrange itself around the truth. Power had changed hands, quietly, irreversibly, and the world was already choosing who to stand with. The hall stood in ruins not physically but socially, financially, morally. Every chandelier still glowed. Every marble column stood tall, yet the architecture of power in the room had been shattered beyond repair. The black woman finally stepped forward, the soft rustle of her gown somehow louder than the frantic whispers around her. She didn't look at the screen or the collapsing numbers or the Lockridge family unraveling in real time. She looked only at the matriarch, the first voice that had tried to shrink her that evening. The older woman's lips quivered. You planned this." "No," the black woman said gently. "You did." The simplicity of it cut deeper than any raised voice ever could. The matriarch sank into a nearby chair, her fury dissolving into something rawer fear laced with the faint beginnings of understanding. Harrison approached, shoulders sagging under the weight of a dynasty collapsing on his back. If there is anything we can do to salvage." She met his eyes. "There is." His breath snagged with desperate hope. "What? Name it. Learn," she said. "Learn the cost of underestimating people you think you can wound without consequence." That wasn't revenge. It was truth. And it stung more than any retribution they had imagined. Her assistant stepped beside her, tablet glowing softly. "The reallocations have cleared, ma'am. The redirected funds are en route to the foundation." "Good," she said. No fanfare. No explanation. But across the city, shelters, women-led startups, and community programs would wake tomorrow to unexpected, life-changing grants funded directly from the capital she withdrew tonight. A redistribution not born of spite, but of clarity. She turned toward the exit. The crowd parted instantly, instinctively, like witnessing the passage of a force they couldn't name but suddenly respected. As she walked, fragments of whispers followed her. She didn't destroy them. She corrected them. That's what real power looks like. She never raised her voice. At the doorway, she paused only once, glancing back at the glittering hall behind her, a monument to old money, old arrogance, old rules. Rules that no longer applied. With a final calm breath, she stepped into the night air, cool and steady against her skin. Her assistant joined her, matching her stride. "You ended an empire tonight," the assistant murmured. "No," the black woman replied softly. "It ended itself. I simply stopped holding it up." And as the doors closed behind her, sealing the Lockridge downfall inside, the truth settled like a final stroke of judgment. Dignity had moved silently. Justice had moved precisely. And she, without shouting, without chaos, had moved the world one decision at a time.